Week 5 in the NFL is almost done with just one game left tonight. The Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Saints of New Orleans. So obviously we will not be breaking that game down. But let's run through what we learned from the NFL schedule this week. And we will start very early out in London, England, as the Jets took on the Minnesota Vikings. And again, the Vikings continue to show their for realness. And a lot of people were wondering, what would Sam Darnold do when there's some pushback and when there is some resistance to what he is actually putting out there? How will he handle it? Because everything has kind of been smooth sailing so far. And obviously there were some stumbles. This was not a perfect game from Sam Darnold, but it was good enough to get them the win. And I thought good enough to make you feel comfortable that this Vikings team is for real. They are a very well-coached football team. And Sam Darnold, with the weapons they have on offense, is enough to get out there and keep piling up these wins and keep being a threat in the NFC North and the NFC just in general. And the one thing that you really take from this is this defense is for real, for real. They are very well coached. Brian Flores has them absolutely rolling, and they are, I think, a real force to be reckoned with. And from a fantasy standpoint, as Deeds points out, needs a bit of help this week. Just 70 points, and you'll get there. I'm in the Vampire League. I'm needing 24 points from Shaheed tonight against Kansas City. So I'm hoping the Chiefs allow big days to secondary options really comes through in this game. So we'll see how that one ends up. But for the Vikings, from a fantasy standpoint, maybe you don't really want to play them. The one guy who has a good game this week is Garrett Wilson with 105 yards through the air. The running game was completely shut down, and Aaron Rodgers did not have a good football game. And again, this is going up against a good defense. And so it is weird to say, hey, this defense is legit, that's awesome, but also you cannot have that bad of a day against this defense. It's weird to say both of those things, but for Aaron Rodgers, it needs to be better, because this was not a move. Bringing Aaron Rodgers in for this roster a couple of years ago, this was not a move to, you know what, let's squeak into the playoffs and let's see what happens. This was a move to become contenders to win the division, contenders to get home playoff games, and contenders to win the Super Bowl. This does not look like a Super Bowl team right now, and he is not executing at a Super Bowl caliber, which, by the way, told you. But you look at the two wins they have this year. It's the Titans, who gave it to them, and it's the Patriots, who suck, and it was on Thursday night, and it was the first time Mayo was coaching on a Thursday night, so he did not have his team ready for that game. Other than that, anytime this team has faced anything remotely close to a challenge, it has failed. And we talked last week about how Aaron Rodgers did a good job in holding his team accountable. Well, now it's time to hold him accountable. He was not good enough to win this football game. 3 interceptions is unacceptable, and the missed passes that they had when there were opportunities to come back in this game just are not good enough. And you can credit Minnesota's defense for doing that to them. And they did a really good job of just shutting that down. I just think that for the Jets, there is a concern now that basically everything we talked about in the preseason is going to be right. That he is just not the guy to elevate this group. And honestly, the coach maybe isn't that guy either. Again, we're not going to run through every game. Dolphins-Patriots was damn near unwatchable. The Panthers have come crashing back down to earth, and the Bears are not this good. Toxic in the chat. I didn't think I was going to win this week in the Vampire League. Just put some scraps together. That's basically where we're at right now, is scrap time with the bye weeks coming up and all of those sorts of things. How was it looking for you, or how is it looking for you here this week, Toxic? Oh yeah, huge day. So yeah, you're definitely going to win. Who was it that balled out? Oh, Chase. Well, that will help. That's going to help get the job done in that league for sure. The Colts against Jacksonville. This was one where you can look at both of these teams and you can say, hey, you know what? Positives to take from this. But also you can look at both these teams and go, you know what? Real negatives to take from this. Walt Grizzly, how many years of choking do you give a head coach before you fire him? This is on the Robert Salah one, but I think you can also very much account it to Doug Peterson. Now, they get the win here, so it's weird to talk about firing a coach off of a win, but I think in both cases, Walt, and again, I'm assuming we're talking about Salah here mainly. I think time is certainly running out. Also, thank you for joining, Walt. Appreciate it. Just in general, not Salah or Peterson. Okay. Apologies for guessing wrong on that. But yeah, I do think that sometimes the blame the coach thing is a bit too quick, and you have a lot of situations where players become almost a little invincible, and that leads to some not great situations. But also, there are way too many occasions where coaches get too long of a leash. Walt talking about Kyle Shanahan. Okay, let's talk about Kyle Shanahan, because again, yeah, this is a common theme. And now, part of it for Shanny this week is his kicker got hurt. And so you didn't have options to kick field goals and stuff like that. But still, the very well thought of, vaunted Kyle Shanahan offensive system should be able to put up more than 23 points against the Arizona Cardinals with me kicking field goals. This Arizona, we've talked about them. They are improved. They shouldn't be that improved that they are holding this team to just 23 points. They were able to, it seemed like they were able to move the ball on them, but and it's not even like the defense didn't play well. Like, holding Arizona to 24 points, you feel like you should be able to win that football game based off of how that Arizona defense can play. And so I don't think Kyle Shanahan gets, like, I don't think he is even on the hot seat there. Injuries have been coming up. Now this offense is, for the most part, pretty healthy. But there is certainly a pattern there, right? Where it is late game situations don't go well. And you can go all the way back to 28-3 against the Patriots, where he was the offensive coordinator and they kept like passing it for some reason and not running the clock out. He is very, very bad at clock management and letting those things kind of wind down. And I do think you look at, like, he is, I do think he's a smart offensive mind. I don't think there's any denying that. But I also do think that, he has very exceptional players all over his roster. And I think the whole, oh my God, he's doing this with Brock Purdy, this is insane. I think we're seeing Brock Purdy's actually a pretty good quarterback. And maybe there is a chicken and egg situation, and he has done a good job of developing this. But there is, I think, no denying that this is a coach who struggles when games are close and struggles in situations where his team has opportunities to put games away and it doesn't work. And yeah, I think we are at a point now with Kyle Shanahan where you can't say anything other than he chokes in big, close, late game situations. And, like, it's not his fault the pass gets deflected and intercepted, but it is, I think, his offense's fault that it got to that point. And even you look back last week when they're kicking the crap out of the Patriots, a lot of drives that just, like, didn't end the way that they needed to. He's been there since, God, it doesn't feel like it's been 7 years, but I guess, hey, it's been there since 2017 and chokes regularly. Like, the Rams game is a perfect example, right? Like, they have already choked this season, and this is one that they let get away. And now, when you look at the NFC West, like, yes, the Seahawks have a bit of a surprising result yesterday, but the 49ers are in third in this division right now. And I don't think, as much as we talked about how Arizona's defense shouldn't be one that is overly threatening, I don't think that they are, like, that much better suited to jump over an Arizona or a Seattle or anyone like that. Like, I think that they are legitimately in some trouble in this division. And I guess, yeah, to that point, the offense only put up 16 against the Cardinals because there was the defensive touchdown on there as well, or defensive plays anyway, that stood up. So no, this is it is a weird spot, and it is very frustrating for the 49ers because when and Walt, I know you are new to the channel, and again, thank you, but this is a team that I am constantly putting on my most talented teams in the NFL list when we do those rankings in the preseason. There is so much talent on this football team, and when you see how wide open the NFC kind of should be, they should be lapping everybody. And I do think that, again, to your point, when you look at the 49ers schedule this year, you can put quite a bit of the blame at the feet of the head coach. So I think It's honestly, it's not the direction I thought I was going to go with this, Walt, but it is a good kind of thought here. You look at the losses that they had. They lose this game by 1 to Arizona, so it is again bad late game situations and not being able to adjust and make the plays properly. And then they lose to the Rams 27-24 in a game where, again, you're winning by a lot, poor clock management, can't put the game away. You lose to the Minnesota Vikings 23-17. Now we are seeing that Vikings win, or that Vikings loss, doesn't look quite as bad as time goes on, because the Vikings look like they are legit. But still, this is a close game that they were unable to get across the finish line. And so, yes, you can draw up all the great plays and all of these things that you want, but there is more to coaching than just being able to draw up the good plays that get some guys open sometimes. It is about clock management. It is about late game situations and being able to get the job done. And we saw a couple of coaches kind of fail in those situations this week, but this is, to Walt's point, this is a pattern in San Francisco that has been going on for years and years and years and multiple Super Bowls. And yes, NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams as well. He is great for neutral observers because it's always interesting, and he is always going for these things that he shouldn't be going for and doing these things that maybe he shouldn't be doing and all of that. But at the end of the day, from a franchise standpoint, I mean, look, as a Raider fan, would I rather him than Antonio Pierce right now? Yeah, I would. And I would figure out the late game stuff later. But when you have a team that is in its championship window, and like it's going to get much more expensive to have this team very quickly. Because Brock Purdy, that whole, you get a quarterback on a round 7 contract, that's going away very quickly. And I think you are starting to see with how the Ayuk process went down and all of that, how difficult it's going to be to kind of put all of those pieces into place. And I do think that there's probably a little bit of, there should be anyway, a little bit of pressure and a lot of the blame on Kyle Shanahan for what has gone on in San Francisco. So no, it is a great point out there, Walt. But again, to kind of tie it back to the game we were talking about before, for Doug Peterson, now he has his Super Bowl with the Philly, and all of that. But like this was a game that shouldn't have been close for Jacksonville. They were dominating early and they just kept letting Indy get back into this game. And offensively, like they were great. Like Trevor Lawrence had one of his better games of the year so far, and they just couldn't get a stop. And that's not something that's been usual for this defense so far this year. And so again, now it looks at Doug Peterson where you finally got your first win, but even this one wasn't as convincing as it needed to be. And for the Colts, the offense kept putting up some points and kept them in there. And Alec Pierce is making a wild catch after wild catch. How are we not getting a stop against this team that has struggled so much on the offensive side so far with Trevor Lawrence? Yeah, and Walt, I would say he has been the problem in Jacksonville. He hasn't been good enough. He was better in this game, and the Colts just could not stop it at all. So it's one of those ones where Jacksonville, all right, you put up 37 points, you never quit and you won, that's great. You probably needed to put that one away a while ago, though, right? And for the Colts, it's like, yeah, you battled back. You almost got there. Probably shouldn't be falling behind by that much and have that much trouble with Jacksonville, right? So this is one of those games that I think kind of just drove home how mid both of these teams really actually are. Speaking of poor clock management, the Buffalo Bills and the Houston Texans. The Texans come away with a 23-20 win. And they lose Nico Collins in this game, and at that point, the offense does kind of stall out a little bit. And so I do think some of the talk of, oh, wow, they have 3 number ones. Like, you know what? I think Tank Dell is really good. I think he's a really good number 2. And at this point, I think Stephon Diggs is kind of appropriately set as a number 3. But to lose Nico Collins, obviously they are struggling running the football right now, and that was a kind of a theme again in this game. They tried to get Ogunbowale going, didn't feel like he really was. Buffalo was able to get back into this one, and then it felt like it had kind of been cost, or they kind of were cost, as Stroud tries and thinks Schultz is going to go out toward the sideline and just misses him, and they called it grounding, which I thought was kind of insane, because that is a miscommunication that happens all the time. And so I thought you could explain away that one pretty easily, keep them in field goal range, and they still get the field goal to give them the lead. Instead, they have to punt it, and Buffalo is pinned down at their 2. And they take a shot on first down, and like, you know what? Give it a go. Like, just let fly the hogs of war or whatever it is, and just let them go and see if you can get a touchdown or a big play out of it to get you into field goal range. When you don't, then you just like pound the ball into the offensive line a couple of times and go to overtime. Like that's basically what it should be. And for them to then punt the ball and with any kind of return allow the Texans to get into field goal range and win that game is some very poor management. And again, to kind of go with the whole theme of this, with what Walt was bringing up earlier with Shanahan, Sean McDermott has done a lot of very good things for this franchise that haven't happened in a really long time. But I think we are getting to the point now where we have seen that there is a ceiling on this guy and that he doesn't necessarily help them get over the top with this roster. And I think that there was a real miss with how they handled that whole game. Walt, I'm not surprised that you would be a Saleh fan coming from being the defensive guy out in San Francisco and the energy and everything that he brought there. But I just think, again, when you look at how late game situations have gone with the Jets and how this roster has kind of not really set everything up and not really advanced, I think that there are some major flaws in his game that need to be ironed out. Doesn't mean they won't be, but I don't think he is helping the Jets. I will say that much. Baltimore against Cincinnati, this game was another absolute wild one and a real knock against people who think that Lamar Jackson can't win the big one and can't really get going because he was phenomenal in this game. Setting up some of those plays that he did. Obviously, Derrick Henry finally gets rolling on the outside. They did a really good job of getting him outside, taking on those defensive backs, and just powering forward through that. I thought he was great, and they stepped up in a big-time way. But it's something we talked about a little bit. The defense continues to be something that you really worry about in Baltimore because they got picked apart in this game. And it was poor tackling on Jamar Chase, who helps Toxic's fantasy team. And it was an inability to stop anything, really, at any point. And then down in the red zone, Joe Burrow was just picking them apart. So you feel a whole lot better about Cincinnati coming out of this one. And it's still, you feel good about Baltimore, but you don't feel great about it because of that defense. And yeah, Walt, back on the Bills. The problem is they refused to get a wide receiver for Allen. I mean, this year they did. He had a pretty good one for a while in Stephon Diggs. But yes, this year they have tried for it. And like, I think Keon Coleman, there's actually something there. But there should have been at least somewhat of a veteran backup plan, aside from Curtis Samuel as the option once you move on from Stephon Diggs. Like, even if it is just a whatever. No, and I'm not questioning that. Like, Diggs, Diva lost them a playoff game for sure. He also got them to a lot of them. Like, he was a talented receiver. And so there is a balance that you need to have, but I do think that they still they gave him that for a bit. But now they are counting on him to try to elevate around and do kind of the Tom Brady thing where, all right, and I mean, Brady was a different situation. He wasn't making as much money, but, or as much of the cap. But for Allen, they are now asking him, like, we are paying you a ton. We need to see you elevate the guys around you. And I think he's done that with a couple, but like we know what Curtis Samuel is. There isn't this mystical thing that he or MVS are going to find at this point in their careers. So, I mean, yeah, like Devontae Adams would make this team a Super Bowl threat, I think. And that would be one of the landing spots for him, for sure. But they are, like, the Chargers kind of did the same thing, where it's like we have a quarterback that we view as a franchise quarterback, and we now have to pay him as a franchise quarterback. So he has to be a franchise quarterback and make the weapons around him better because we can't afford to bring one of those in. But I do think there are a lot of veteran receivers that you could have brought in that weren't Curtis Samuel or MVS. That maybe would have helped. So much for my Washington might come back down to earth thing. Hey, they were phenomenal again. And the Browns, it's so bad there. They took 2 timeouts on goal-to-go situations and ended up kicking field goals. Like, Deshaun Watson is just the drizzling shits and is so bad and has just basically given it all up. He'll start games and it's great. And then as it goes on, he gets less and less interested in how that game is going. Raiders, Broncos. Broncos are looking a little bit more for real, and a game against the Raiders isn't going to drive that home, but this defense does look legit, and Bo Nix, albeit against a not great defense, has shown that there is at least a bit of maturing going on in his game as this season progresses. They're not like a threat to, I don't even think, make the playoffs, quite frankly. But I do think they're going to beat some bad teams, which they did this week. For the Raiders, the Gardner Minshew thing is just, it's not working. And now all eyes, as was pointed out in here before, all eyes certainly go to Devontae Adams and seeing what the Raiders can get for him. Because again, as we kind of addressed last week, this team has some pass catching options. Like Jacoby Myers, if he's your number one wide receiver, you're not winning Super Bowls, but he's fine. And they have guys like Tucker who I think are interesting, and Bowers is a beast. So those are all good players that they can go out and pick up some yards and actually help you out. You don't have a quarterback though. Minshew, it's the league has figured him out. And I don't think Aiden O'Connell is any great shakes at all. Walt, on the Commanders, Browns, Cardinals, Bengals, and Giants. I'm still waiting for Washington to play a decent team. I would say Cardinals are a decent team, and I would say the Bengals are a decent team as well. They haven't played the tippity top of their schedule yet. Coming up, like the Ravens game this weekend is going to be an interesting test. But I mean, and this is something I kind of did last year. We were looking at a few teams. It's like, all right, well, who have they beat? Who's there to beat? Like if we are not counting the Cardinals and the Bengals as decent teams, then our bar for decent teams is kind of only cleared by like 4 or 5, right? Like let's look at the Commanders' schedule the rest of the way. Ravens, I would put in that as a good team. Panthers, no. Bears, no. Giants, no. Steelers, yes. Eagles, yes. Cowboys, I wouldn't. Titans, no. Saints, defense probably, but like that is a test for them offensively. Eagles, yes. Falcons, borderline. Okay, and then if we're saying Eagles no, then they're not going to play a decent team. And that's where we're at in this league right now. And that is kind of a bigger picture thing. And it's one of the things we talked about last year with a few of these teams where it's, well, who have they beat? That there isn't anyone to beat. Like, there isn't what would you consider a good win in the NFL these days? Because there are only a handful of teams who look like they have it all together. The rest of them, there are some holes on teams. Like, you run through the entirety of the league right now. Kansas City, offense doesn't look super explosive. Minnesota, it's Sam Darnold. How can we possibly trust that? The Houston Texans, yeah, they're 4-1. The offense has looked good in exactly one of those games. Washington is who we are talking about, and the defense is supposed to be abysmal. The Detroit Lions have finally got some things like pieced together here a little bit, but still, like, they didn't look fantastic in the first little bit. Atlanta, Kirk Cousins' leg could fly off at the end of every play. Baltimore, they have had some troubles in some weird games. They lost to the Raiders so far at different points this season. Buffalo, their defense is completely falling apart and is really banged up. Seattle looks like they should have a bunch of talent, but just got walked by the Giants and lost that game that they shouldn't have. The Steelers, defense looks really good, but the offense can only put up 17 points a game. And so you go on through. Every single team has a flaw right now. And so that is why the door is open for a team like a Washington to step through, for a team like an Arizona to step through and to take that. And why it is so frustrating, to Toxic's point in the chat, the Browns completely fumbled the bag with the Watson trade. They have one of the most talented defensive players the league has ever seen in on their defensive line right now. And they had Nick Chubb, and they have Amari Cooper, and now they have Jerry Jeudy, who kind of is what he is. And as far as tight ends go, David Njoku is a pretty good one. And so it feels like you should have this opportunity to just walk right through, because everything is so wide open in this NFL right now, and they just can't do it. And so that is where you get a lot of the desperation. Well, we'll just get a new quarterback, get a new quarterback in. And it is an entire cycle that just feeds on itself. So yes, if they beat the Ravens, then I will give them that credit. But if they lose to Baltimore and then win 5 in a row, I'm going to have a hard time not giving them credit, because There's like 3 teams in the league that you can give teams credit for beating every single week. And when you don't play any of them, like, no, like, I am not saying go cash a Washington Super Bowl ticket right now, but I am saying that when we are looking at who's legit, the list isn't that big.